let's go to the Bible and see what Jesus says about how do you handle the haters? How do you handle those that are against you? And we're going to go to our leadership lessons from Luke. Yeah, there's so much value in just one book of the Bible. Could you imagine if you took this time to study every book of the Bible? There'd be a lot of wisdom in there. So we're looking at Luke 9 from verse 1. And it's called, the heading is Jesus Sends Out the 12. When Jesus had called the 12 together, he gave them power and authority to drive out all demons and to cure diseases, and he sent them out to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. I'm going to pause there. That's quite a good leadership lesson right there. How do you delegate effectively? How do you make sure that when you're assigning tasks and getting your team to do things, how do you make sure it's done properly? Well, right here. He gathered them together and gave them power and authority. Too often leaders will delegate without actually giving the right power or authority to the people. And we're also talking about the ability, right? So the skills to be able to drive out demons and cure diseases. Are you sending your team out with the right authority? Are you sending them out feeling empowered? Are you sending them out with the right skills to do what they do? I digress. And feel free to jump in on any of these sidebars.
Absolutely great digression, because I think what you're hinting at there is the difference between delegation and direction. Yes. If Jesus had just said, you go out and proclaim the kingdom of God and heal the sick, that's direction. Mm-hmm. But before he did that, he empowered them. He empowered them with authority and the capacity to drive out demons. And I think that's what delegation is about. Delegation empowers people, whereas with direction, essentially you tell people what to do and then you hover around them to make sure they're doing it. But with delegation, you empower people, you let them go, and then you have them report to you. So that's a great lesson in leadership, even though it might not be highly relevant to the theme for our podcast today. But it's a really, really important lesson for leaders. Trust your people, but give them the power, the authority that they need in order to be able to actually prove to you that they can be trusted with whatever it is you've delegated to them.
Yeah, and we're only 2 verses in. There's a lot of wisdom in this book. Okay, verse 3, he told them, take nothing for your journey, no staff, no bag, no bread, no money, no extra tunic. Now, I kind of want to give you an opportunity to preach that for a moment, Dr. Rob, because I think that too many Christian leaders see this and go, well, I don't have to be prepared. I can just go and God will provide for my journey. Is that right?
No, unless you got a specific word from God. And look, there was a whole movement that sort of grew up in church, in the evangelical churches in the 1980s, where pastors were sending people in their congregations out just like that. Don't take anything, you just go, and then you trust God to provide. And a lot of people were seriously hurt and damaged by that experience. But as I always say, I use the CPA method when I'm reading the Bible: context, principle, application. The context here was a context of poverty where most people only had one tunic or one cloak. That's all they had. So he was saying, you're going into these areas to preach the kingdom, to preach the gospel. You go in as one of them. You go in just like them, because most of these people would have been day labourers, or they might have had a small flock of goats and sheep or something like that. They were essentially living at subsistence level. So he was saying, don't you go in there, with beautiful clothes and, a team of camels and the fastest donkey in the West and that kind of thing. Go in just like them and take the message of the gospel to them. And, when he's saying in the very next sentence, if people don't welcome you, well, you see, part of the culture in the East, of course, was hospitality, right? So if people didn't welcome you, that meant they were rejecting you. And
Yes.
I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yes.
Read on.
So let's go. So take nothing for the journey. Whatever house you enter, stay there until you leave that town. If people do not welcome you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave their town as a testimony against them. And so that's where I kind of want to leave it. It does go on a little bit more, but I want to leave it there. Is like, how did Jesus say? How do you handle the enemies? How do you control the haters, etc.? Well, like the theologian Taylor Swift says, shake it off, shake it off. But I'm sure, like I think that is beautiful. It's like, just shake it off. Now, I know, Dr. Rod, you're probably going to give me a deep theological meaning as to what that signified in that, the context of that time. But I kind of read it more interpretively and just go, just shake it off. That's what Jesus told me. You got some enemies? Just shake it off.
See you later, guys, basically. See you later, guys.
Was there some cultural significance to them?
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Look, back in those days, of course, you didn't have lovely Nike shoes and socks. You wore sandals. Sometimes you just went barefoot if you were too poor to have sandals. There were really very few paved roads. And so when you walked somewhere, you got your feet dirty. And an important aspect of hospitality was offering people water with which they could wash their feet. So if you went to a town and people in that town didn't take you in and offer you hospitality, your feet would have remained dirty. And so it was a cultural thing among the Jews in particular to shake off the dust, which was to shake off the profanity of paganism, actually. And so really I think what Jesus was saying was, this is a very precious message. Remember, he sent out 12. And there's a big job to do. So he's really saying, you know what? If people reject you in one town or village, literally shake the dust from your feet, which culturally was saying essentially like, we wash our hands of you. Why? Is that because Jesus didn't love them? No. It was because there was a big job to do. And the only way in which to be effective in carrying out what purpose Jesus had set out for them was to just say, see you later, guys. If you're not going to receive the message, see you later, guys. We're going to move on and we'll find a place where they are open to the message. And you know what? That's a good lesson for those of us who are leaders of any kind of Christian organisation, that, you know what, there's a big world out there, a big world. And that big world, it's in our workplaces.
Yeah.
Look, even here in Australia, we're about 2/3, maybe a little bit more than that, of our adult population is in paid employment, either part-time or full-time, permanent or casual. So we've got 13.5 million people in workplaces, most days, Monday through Friday. And you know what? If you're a Christian and you don't get a reception, don't get upset, don't get angry, and don't give up. Move on. Move on, because there's such a big job for us to do.
Yeah, I think that this one thing I remember when I was learning sales training, and there was something that someone said, I forget the exact context, but it stuck to me like this: is don't waste your time trying to change someone's mind. Go and find someone who already believes in your product or service and sell them. It's much easier just to sell them if they're open to the idea or whatever. Now, obviously, we all have different purposes, and some of us have been called to really try to change people's minds and stuff like that. But we need to, once again, it's about knowing your purpose and knowing your calling. But one thing that I think that is really important for this is that you're saying is like, you don't get bogged down in that fight. if it's not a fight that God's called you to, move on from it. Dust it off, shake it off, and just move on, because we've got a bigger mission to fulfill. There's more for us to achieve in this world. Our organizations have to grow bigger so we can buy out our enemies. We need to use this stuff. Don't get trapped in the fight, don't allow them to live rent free in your mind. Use, as Patrick Bet-Davies said, use them as motivation, as fuel to drive you. Don't don't change the way that you operate, because then, as Ethan Klein has seen, you might get some more haters from the people that are already supporting you, that have actually been part of driving you forward. Build your big organization bigger so you can just buy that person out if need be. And also, while you're doing this, as Mike Johnson typified, the Speaker of the House, stand on your founding principles. Make sure you know what your values are, so you're driving towards those things. Make those things the guiding post for you to be able to overcome your challenges that you're facing, and through that is how we control our haters. And as theologian Tay says, shake it off. So I hope that's been helpful to you, finishing on that note. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.